this. Even the person that was in the school at the same time with us, we couldn't.
So what was happening? Where did this go after your training? You're in this little room. Did you begin communicating with aliens? I know you did because I read your book, but tell listeners what happened.
Sure. Well, not during the school. The school was designed, and there was some sort of technology that was behind it. And I'm not, to this day, I don't really know how they did what they did, but I was told to, I would look at a computer monitor, and I didn't have any connection to it. There was no, wires coming from my head to the computer or anything like that. I just would look at the computer screen, and they would play. Actually, I had headphones on, and they would play tones in the headphones, and then I would have to mentally hum those tones. And
mental humming.
And then I would concentrate on a sine wave. I'm sorry, say it again.
I just said, did you say mental humming? It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you never really think of that as being something you'd want to do.
Right. But okay, go on.
That was how, I guess that's how they were going to train my brain to start doing this. My brain already knew how to do it. It's just that I had to, my conscious had to be able to activate it or to be able to use it at will. So that was the exercise that they gave me in order to do it. So I would hum, excuse me, I would mentally hum this tone, and I would just, initially it was like hours. I would just sit there and try to mentally hum a tone, and I would look at a sine wave in one of the boxes on my computer screen. There was only one box initially. And so I would just look at it. And then he said, my instructor through the headphones said that you'll sense a, for the lack of a better term, a click, like something will activate kind of in your mind, and you'll feel this sensation that will tell you that there's success going on. And you'll also notice it in the sine wave. The sine wave will start to flatten a little bit. So initially that, I'd just sit there and look at the sine wave and mentally hum. And eventually, exactly what he said, I sensed something happening, and I could see the sine wave starting to flatten. And so it was kind of like a muscle where I finally figured out where that muscle was, and then I could start manipulating it and start, working at it. And this is, it may seem a simple thing to do, but, because it's just your mind, you're just thinking, but wow, it was difficult. The concentration level was, you had to just be so concentrating initially when I was first starting to do it. Oh, it was really incredible. And of course, I was going through all these emotions of, I'm special and I'm doing something for my country, and this is just so awesome, but I can't share it with anybody. And so I was going through all this too. And then my regular school, 8 hours during the day. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very taxing. I mean, and I was only, in my mid-20s and wasn't married or anything. So it was
you had no swinging single life.
Huh?
You had no you had no nightlife, basically. Did you have a personal life?
Definitely not during that time, no.
There was a movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats, and I just imagine your film or book could be called Man Who Stares at the Sine Wave. I mean, it must have been very tough work. You were sitting there for hours, days, and you had to kind of synchronize your mind or mental humming with this sine wave. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Interesting.
And eventually went into more sine waves and several sine waves at a time, and eventually led to 10 sine waves, and then it would lead to images. They would show me images, and then I would have to I would hear tones that corresponded to those images, and my mind started to associate images with the communication itself, the manipulation of the sine waves. Mm-hmm. So eventually it started to kind of all meld together. And it's not a linear process.
Okay.
It's very hard to explain because once I start the ball rolling, and I started to get this going, my mind started to take over and be able to learn as it was going. It was kind of like an algorithm. It was building on itself, and it
Now,
was
Dan,
just the oddest thing.
were you able to affect the shape of the sine wave? Is that what you were trying to do?
Oh
You were
yeah,
trying to manipulate
definitely.
it. How did that feel when you finally were manipulating things on a screen with your mind? I mean, how was
Well,
that?
I was extremely excited about it because just the fact that I was doing something that nobody that I ever that I ever knew could do. That I can do something that probably very, very, very few people on the face of the earth could do. It was extremely, I guess, short term. It was very rewarding, but again, when you get successes like that, and you have something that feels so powerful, and you can't share it with anybody, it loses its luster about 10 minutes later.
Sure, you're kind of all alone
Yeah.
with a big secret.
Yeah.
It's like celebrating Christmas alone, I imagine. It had to be very lonely and very,
Yeah.
very tough on you for a young guy.
And it's not just the fact that I can't share it with somebody, but it was, or not just the fact that I can't share a secret with somebody, but such an amazing development in my life, a personal development. Not oh, I just saw a UFO or something that just kind of happens outside of me. This is something that was part of my being that I could not share, and that was the frustrating part.
I bet it was. I just want to remind everyone we're talking with Dan Sherman on Epic Voyages on Inception Radio Network, and the story is only getting better and better. So you're at this point now, Dan, back in your story where you're able to sync your mind with sine waves and manipulate them on the screen. Does this end your training? Do you graduate at some point, and where do you go next?
Well, there was no graduation ceremony, if that's what you mean, but
I guess not. No top secret graduation ceremony.
There's a ceremony with nobody invited. So the captain he met me at the room there, and he said that your training is over, and he said there's our system is a third-party introduction system whereby you are introduced to your next contact by me. So anytime, or I'm going to call you eventually, and I will introduce you to the next person that's going to be your contact, and that's it. You're done. And of course, you can't tell anybody. And I did sign some paperwork, and I can't remember exactly what the paperwork was about, but I did sign some paperwork. And so, and then of course there was another little thing. I'm not exactly sure when it was during the school, but I started taking these pills that they gave me. And I asked what they were, of course, and he said he really didn't know, but he said it was important for the development. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any type of effect, overt effect. But I also took the pills at my next base where I was actually operational with the job. So I'm not exactly sure what they were, and actually I didn't take them the entire time there. I took them during the beginning, and I don't think I took them the entire time there. So it was just another little odd, injection into the story. I have no idea what they were, why I had to take them, what effect it had as it relates to the ability. I have no idea. And that was just one of those things in the book.
We can only speculate then.
Yeah, that was one of the things in the book where, you don't just leave things like that untied if you're making something up. If you make it up, then you try to, you expound upon it and make it a big cool issue. And I got nothing, unfortunately.
Okay, well, but you do have something. You have a genuine mystery, and
as it relates to the pills.
Well, yes, right. But it kind of fits in with this, with the weirdness of it all, because you're going to tell us next, I hope, soon, what it's like to communicate with an actual being from another world, which is where all this is going, I hope.
Yeah. In my next base, I went back to my base that I was stationed at when I went TDY to school. Okay. And about, I don't know exactly what time it was, but there was several months went by, and I actually got change of station orders to go to another base, and it was overseas. And so I went to that new base, and in the book, that's what I refer to as PPD base number 1, because I was at 2 bases. Sorry?
Is PPD?
Yeah.
Just explain PPD to listeners.
Sure. The project was called Project Preserve Destiny. That's the name of the project that I was involved with.
That's pretty heavy.
That's what they told me when I was introduced into the program, or inducted, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
So when I refer to PPD, it's just referring to my job, as it relates to the Gray Project.
Okay. Well, you got me hanging on the edge of my seat here. So, yeah, please go on.
When I got there and I got to my next base, and it was a couple months before I was actually contacted again by my first contact, that introduced me into the program. He called me, and I was at my dorm, and he said, "Meet your next contact at the gate at such and such time of the compound that you work at." So I met him there, and it was actually the captain that was in charge of the Black project that I was working at the time. And so he brought me in. He told me where I was going to be working, or what I was going to be doing while I was working my Black project. He said, "This is where you're going to be reporting your comms." And he opened up a window in my computer, and it was a special way to do it. And then when I started receiving communications, I would type the communications into that box in the computer. And then when I was done, I would hit a keystroke, and it would just be sent off, and that was it. That was my job. So when I felt these, I would feel a communication coming on, it's not really a feeling, it's just that it would start. And so I would receive a communication from an alien species, or my alien contact, and I would start typing the communications into the box. I would open up the box and start typing it. And then when the communications were done, I would send I would close the box, and it would send off somewhere. It would go somewhere. And that was it. That was my job as it relates to the Gray Project.
So, did you actually hear alien voices, or did you actually talk? Were you exchanging words?
This is perhaps the most difficult thing to convey, when we talk about the story and talk about the experience, because this is how I kind of feel it out, so to speak. When you with somebody,
Dan,
yeah,
you know what? Yes, I can hear you, and I'm thinking that this part of the story is so juicy. This is the meat and potatoes. This is what I've been waiting for. Hearing from you what it's like to speak with an extraterrestrial. That this is exactly the right time to take a little commercial break, my friend. Kind of let us meditate on what is to come. I want to remind you all that there will be a Q&A for Dan Sherman at the top of the hour at 7 o'clock. You can all get in touch with him or us through the chat room, or you can call Inception Radio Network at 888-919-2355, or check the website inceptionradionetwork.com and click on the Listen Live or interactive chat room. Again, folks, this is my first time doing this, so I'm trying to figure it out, but I hope it's going well. I hope you're all having fun. I know I am. So here's the commercial. Welcome back, everybody, to tonight's epic voyage. I'm Pat Uskert here on the Inception Radio Network, and I'm talking with Dan Sherman, and we're continuing our conversation about his involvement in Project Preserve Destiny, a secret government program that involves communication with extraterrestrials. So, Dan, believe in our story. You just completed your training, and you're finally at your active unit, I believe, about to do some real communicating. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I was after the initial briefing of how I'm going to actually do my job. Then he just kind of left me on my own, and I was supposed to wait for communication to start, and it didn't start immediately. It was probably a couple months, or I don't know exactly what the time frame was, but it wasn't an immediate thing. And I was beginning to wonder if this was actually going to happen, and what it was going to feel like, and when it would happen. And then it just all of a sudden, when I was at work, I started to receive a comm, and it startled me so much that I actually sent back, wait, and I said it out loud. I vocalized it. And the person who was sitting next to me, we were in a dual configuration where you had to have two people in the van at any given time. And so you had a partner when you were at work. And the partner, of course, didn't know anything about this. He was just part of the Black Project. And he looked at me and said, wait for what? What are you talking about? And
you're just blurting out, wait.
Huh?
I'm sorry. So you're just blurting out, wait, like someone with Tourette syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what it must have looked like anyway. So I opened my window.
What caused you to yell, wait?
Well, I was, my contact was starting to send the message.
Okay. Let's hear it.
And I didn't have my window open to start typing the message, and I didn't, I wasn't ready. And of course, this was the first time too, so it startled me.
Wow.
And so I opened the window, and I started to, and then I said, go ahead. And then there would always be a preamble of what ended up being my code name or number. It was Staunch 118. So he would send that, and then essentially it was just a string of information, and most times it was just numbers. Sometimes it was imagery, but most of the time it was numbers. And I would just type this into the window, and then he would sign off, and I knew that the message had ended, and I would send the message. But the communications. Go ahead.
I was just curious. So now you're doing this. You've received some communication from somewhere, right? It's kind of in your mind.
Yeah, and this is always the most difficult. As I was saying before the break, this is the most difficult part for people to understand is the mechanics of the communication. And I always say to people, it's like trying to explain the color red to somebody who was born without eyes. Okay, they have no frame of reference to try to understand what that means. And that's kind of the same way with the communications. It was an instant form of communication. In other words, the entire communication would come to me instantaneously. I would know it. But my human mind, of course, and the way we communicate and the way we think in linear terms. Like, when we started this conversation, it was 50 minutes ago. And we went through 50 minutes of discussion, and we're here now. But the communications that I received, it was instantaneous. In other words, all that 50 minutes of me or us thinking about and talking about that conversation would come to me instantaneously. I would know the entire communication. But I would have to translate that into a time-based communication, which I had to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and it flowed, so that when I typed it, there would be something that would be understandable by a human on the other end.
So was that basically the function of your position that you were trained for? That normal people wouldn't be able to handle this kind of zap of communication. They actually needed receivers or intuitive communicators like you that could receive this zap of a message and then translate it into something that people could understand. Is that my understanding?
I think the format of the communication was secondary to the fact that we could actually communicate. It's just that the way they communicated was that way. But I don't think the reason, and of course we can close on probably the reasons, but I don't think the reason was that we could communicate like that. The reason was that we could just do it, period, communicate with an alien race. It's just that was the format, and the ability was in that format. But so it was an extremely, it was a very detailed communication, okay, but it was not like the way we think and talk and communicate our concepts and ideas to one another. It was completely different. So the challenge that I had, and that's one of the things that we went through in the school, was being able to receive that information, but then also translate it into something that was understandable by a human mind. That was one of the biggest challenges. But it was very, very, there was not any room. A lot of people will ask me if it has anything to do with remote viewing, this concept of being able to do something with your mind.
And what do you answer to that?
From what I've read about remote viewing, it doesn't have any connection whatsoever, because remote viewing was a very it wasn't as detailed. You kind of got concepts and peripheral types of things, but with this, it was exact, and there was no room for error, and it was instantaneous and complete. There was no. I did have questions sometimes, like I would ask to clarify something, but only because I forgot what it was that I was still supposed to put in order in the communication. What order it was in, or I had forgotten that particular detail because it took me 30 seconds to get to that point in my typing it. But the actual communication itself was very detailed, and I knew it exactly
Dan,
the way it was supposed to be.
Can you tell us what is the purpose of this communication? What are we communicating, or what are we listening for? What was the military or the government program that you were involved in? What were they hoping to glean from all this?
Well, I think the communications themselves were just training. It was just to keep the ability alive and well for when, at some point in the future, they actually needed to use the intuitive communicators for some operational purpose. And that is where we kind of break down, because they didn't tell me what that purpose was, but he did say that we were needed for some future event when all electromagnetic communication would be eliminated, or it would be out. It would not be functional. So they would need the intuitive communicators stationed around the world to be used to communicate between leaders, world leaders, and strategic communications, for military or whatever. So we were basically just a telephone line that would be used in the event that there would be no way to communicate any other way.
So this is something that's ongoing. Do you feel this program is still in effect now? Well, if the things that told me were true, then yes, they would have to still continue to have the program, because this event that is supposed to happen in the future hasn't happened yet. So, but they seem to think that it will happen someday. It's just interesting. You kind of painted a picture of what this is all about. They kind of keep these intuitive communicators active, so maybe at all times, to keep a kind of a channel open between us and whoever these other people are. Who are they, these off-world people? Well, I think there might be a secondary purpose there, in that, because we don't really need the presence of the alien species in order to it's a byproduct of the need to have this communications network. It's just that we're using the technology or the ability of the alien race in order to use or have this capability. But as far as having another reason to be communicating with them, I don't know. They never told me that. And I'm sure there's many other reasons and many other programs and missions that are surrounding the Gray projects. Well, Dan, you've just opened up a huge box of aliens. It's 7 o'clock, and that means it's kind of time for questions and answers. Answers from you and questions from the audience.
Hopefully I'll have them.
If anyone would like to call in and talk to Dan or submit a question via the interactive chat room, please do. The number is 888-919-2355, or you can just message us in the interactive chat room at inceptionnetworkradio.com. Is that right? Or is it Inception Radio Network? Yeah, that's right. Sorry, everybody. It's my first time. InceptionRadioNetwork.com. So yeah, until those questions start coming in, I will be the first to ask some questions myself. Dan, you had these official communications with these extraterrestrials. And then you, in your book, you go on to say that you actually snuck in a few private communications as well. You kind of like while you were doing official business. Could you, you know what? Could you just tell me quickly one of the questions that you asked the ETs?
Yeah. Well, I try to minimize people's expectations in the book because it wasn't like a Diane Sawyer interview type situation where I sat down and had the ability to shoot off questions. It's kind of hard to explain, but I found another level in the communications where I felt more comfortable, or not felt more comfortable, but I felt that it wasn't an official communications, and it was their reaction to finding that level that prompted me to say, okay, maybe I can just ask superfluous questions that has nothing to do with what I'm doing, with the mission. So I did try to ask questions, and typically I would not get an answer. Okay. They would just sign off. But I did get. They weren't in a format of question answer